This story is titled, "My Wife Humiliated Me in Front of My Family and Colleagues, then threw the ring in my face, so I sent her compromising video to her relatives, and now their family is crumbling." Hey Reddit, I'm 27 years old and work as a marketing consultant, living what I'd consider a decent life. I've been with my girlfriend Isabella for 4 years now, and we're both in the marketing industry. We actually met at one of those mind-numbingly boring industry summits, where the biggest excitement was arguing about campaign metrics over stale donuts and terrible coffee that tasted like burnt water. Despite the soul-crushing environment, we hit it off pretty quickly. About a year ago, Isabella moved into my midtown apartment, and 8 months ago, I proposed to her with my grandmother's ring. It was this beautiful vintage piece that had been in my family for generations, and honestly, life was actually pretty nice for once. I felt like I had finally found someone who truly understood me. About 20 months into our relationship, something significant happened that would change the entire dynamic between us. During one of those late-night conversations where all your walls come down and you're just two people being completely honest with each other, I told Isabella about something from my past. It was a medical situation from when I was younger that left me with certain physical realities I'd learned to live with over the years. This wasn't something I felt comfortable sharing online, even anonymously, because it wasn't minor or trivial at all. It was the source of deep personal insecurity that had affected my confidence for years. You know the kind of thing I'm talking about. Something that makes you hesitate before getting intimate with someone. Something that makes you wonder if you'll ever find someone who can truly accept you for who you are. I had spent years working through the psychological impact with therapists, learning to accept myself despite my limitations. Isabella's reaction was everything I had hoped for and more. She was understanding, supportive, and gentle in all the right ways. She made me feel like it didn't change anything between us. That real love meant accepting someone completely. Flaws, scars, and all. She held me that night and whispered that she loved me exactly as I was. That vulnerability was what made relationships real and meaningful. That moment sealed our bond in ways I had never experienced before, creating a foundation of trust that made me believe we could actually build a life together. But navigating her family dynamics was an interesting challenge, especially coming from my background where people generally said what they meant. Her father Marcus was one of those deeply faithful men who wore his religion like armor against the world. He attended church every Sunday and Wednesday evening, said grace before every meal, and had biblical quotes for every life situation. He seemed like a genuinely good man with strong moral principles, the kind of person who would give you the shirt off his back if you needed it. However, watching him interact with his wife was genuinely painful to witness. She controlled every single aspect of his existence. What he wore to work, how he spent his free time, which friends he was allowed to see, and even what food he ordered at restaurants. He would just nod along and say, "Whatever you think is best, dear," while his wife Victoria made all the decisions. The man had completely surrendered his backbone somewhere along the way, probably worn down by decades of manipulation disguised as marriage. Victoria herself was a real piece of work. She was one of those women who smiled sweetly while sliding knives between your ribs, treating every conversation like a chess match she was determined to win. She had this particular way of making comments that sounded supportive on the surface, but somehow left you feeling smaller afterward. She was always perfectly dressed, always ready with advice that nobody had asked for, and constantly positioning herself as the ultimate authority on how other people should live their lives. I had figured that Isabella was different from her mother since she always seemed to roll her eyes at Victoria's controlling behavior during the few family gatherings I had attended over the years. But as it turned out, I was completely wrong about who she really was underneath all that apparent disagreement with her mother's tactics. I spent 4 weeks meticulously planning our engagement dinner, paying attention to every tiny detail. This wasn't going to be some casual get-together at a chain restaurant. I reserved the private dining room at Augustus, easily the most exclusive restaurant in the city. I flew Marcus and Victoria in from Tampa, coordinated schedules with my sister Sophia and my best friend Blake, and arranged transportation for everyone. I even had the restaurant prepare a special menu featuring Isabella's favorite dishes, and I bought a new Hugo Boss suit because I wanted everything to be absolutely perfect. The financial investment was significant. I probably spent close to $9,000 on that one evening. But it felt worth every penny because this was supposed to be one of those milestone moments you remember forever. I mean, it was my engagement party, so it should be elegant and memorable for all the right reasons. The night went exactly as I had planned. 22 people gathered in that private dining room, everyone dressed up and in genuinely good spirits. Marcus said grace, talking about marriage and trust, which felt absolutely perfect at the time. I kept looking at Isabella across the table, thinking about how incredibly lucky I was to have someone who really understood me, who knew my worst secrets and loved me anyway. When it came time for the toasts, the mood shifted to something more formal and heartfelt. Marcus went first with a speech that honestly moved me to tears. He talked about welcoming me into their family, about how he could see the genuine love between Isabella and me, and about God's plan bringing the right people together at the right time. Sophia spoke next, getting a little emotional as she talked about watching me find real happiness again after my divorce. She mentioned how different I seemed with Isabella, how much lighter and more confident I had become. She talked about childhood memories of me always being the protector, the one who looked out for everyone else, and how it made her happy to see someone finally taking care of me for a change. Blake kept his toast light but sincere, joking about how I had finally found someone who could put up with my obsessive planning and my tendency to research every major purchase for 2 months before making a decision. Then Isabella stood up, and I leaned back in my chair with what I'm sure was the biggest, most content grin on my face. I was expecting some sweet story about our journey together. Maybe something about how she knew from our first real conversation that I was different from other guys she had dated. She started normally enough, talking about how we met at that summit, and how I had been the only person there who actually seemed interested in discussing something other than quarterly reports and market projections. She mentioned our first real date at that terrible Italian place in Midtown, where the waiter spilled red sauce on my white shirt and I had laughed it off instead of getting angry. I was nodding along, feeling that warm glow of contentment you get when everything in your life feels exactly where it should be. But then something shifted dramatically in her expression. The loving smile I had been expecting slowly twisted into something else entirely. Something cold and calculating that I had never seen before. She raised her glass higher, and the room quieted as everyone prepared to hear what they expected would be a touching declaration of love. Instead, Isabella looked directly at me and said, "Here's to marrying a man who worships me. Proof that love really does conquer all, even when the equipment comes in travel size." There was dead silence for about 3 seconds as everyone processed what had just happened. Then Victoria started cackling like it was the funniest thing she had ever heard in her life. Her brother Nathan nearly spit out his drink laughing, and even Marcus chuckled nervously. The guy was so completely whipped that he laughed when his wife laughed, even when he clearly didn't understand the joke. Meanwhile, Sophia and Blake sat frozen in their chairs, their faces reflecting the complete horror and disbelief that I felt flooding through my entire system. This woman I had planned to marry, who I had trusted with the most vulnerable part of my soul, had just weaponized that trust in front of both our families. She had taken the moment when I had been most honest and scared, when I had literally trembled while telling her about my deepest insecurities, and turned it into entertainment for a room full of people. The cruelty was so calculated, so deliberate, that I almost couldn't process what had just happened. What made it infinitely worse was the obvious premeditation behind it. This wasn't some slip of the tongue or nervous rambling that came out wrong. She had planned this moment, rehearsed it, and probably even discussed it with her mother beforehand. The smirk on her face told me everything I needed to know about how much she was enjoying my pain and humiliation. I didn't yell or throw anything or make the kind of scene that would have given her ammunition to call me unstable or abusive later. Instead, I just pushed back my chair and stood up slowly, every eye in the room tracking my movement. The laughter started dying as people began to realize that something was seriously wrong with what had just happened. I walked around the table to where Isabella still stood, her smirk starting to falter as she watched me approach with an expression she had never seen before. I took her left hand gently and slipped my grandmother's engagement ring off her finger in one smooth, deliberate motion. Looking directly into her eyes, I said clearly enough for everyone in that room to hear, "You don't deserve this." Then I turned and walked straight out of that dining room without looking back, ignoring her voice behind me calling, "Oh, come on, it was just a joke. Don't be so sensitive. Where are you going?" On the drive home, I was systematically dismantling every assumption I had made about our relationship. Had any of it been real? When she had held me that night after I told her about my condition, had she already been planning ways to use it against me? How many of her friends already knew my secrets because she thought my pain was amusing? By the time I pulled into my parking garage, I knew exactly what I was going to do. This wasn't going to be some messy breakup with crying and begging. This was done, and I was going to handle it like a business transaction. I got to our apartment, which was technically my apartment, and went straight to the closet. I started pulling out every piece of clothing that belonged to her. Dresses, work clothes, that expensive coat I had bought her for Christmas. Everything went into trash bags. I went room by room, clearing out every trace of her presence. Bathroom stuff, kitchen items, bedroom belongings, everything. It didn't matter if it was expensive or had sentimental value. If it belonged to her, it went straight into trash bags. It took me about 100 minutes to clear out 4 years of shared living. 14 bags total, all tied up and ready to go. Then I sat down and waited for what I knew was coming next. Isabella showed up exactly 52 minutes after I had walked out of the restaurant. I could hear her in the hallway fumbling with her key. Then, the confused rattling when it wouldn't turn. I had called my building's emergency locksmith while I was packing her stuff. It cost me double for after-hours service, but it was worth every penny. The pounding started immediately, loud and frantic knocking, like she thought she could break the door down. "I know you're in there. Open the door. We need to talk about this," she shouted through the door. I let her bang for a full 6 minutes before opening it, just wide enough to see her face. Her makeup was smeared from crying, her hair was messed up from running her hands through it, and she had that panicked look of someone who had just realized they had torched their entire life in one stupid moment. "Baby, please let me explain," she started, her voice already cracking with desperation. "It was just a stupid joke that came out all wrong. You know I didn't mean anything by it. I was nervous and trying to be funny, and it just sounded worse than I intended. Please don't do this over one mistake." "We're done," I said, keeping my voice flat and final. "Don't come back." I started to close the door, but she stuck her foot in the gap. Wait, you can't just end 4 years over this. I made a mistake, okay? I admit it. But we can work through this. We can go to counseling. I'll apologize to everyone. Whatever you want." "Move your foot," I said calmly. "No, not until you listen to me. This is insane. You're throwing away everything we built together," she pleaded, her voice becoming more frantic. I repeated, "Move your foot." "No, not until you listen to me. This is insane. You're throwing away everything we built together." I said once more, "Move your foot." She stared at me for a few seconds, probably hoping to see some crack in my resolve. When she realized I was dead serious, she finally pulled her foot back. I closed the door and turned the new deadbolt with a satisfying click. She kept at it for another 25 minutes, pounding, pleading, threatening. She tried everything from promises to make it up to me to threats about the lease and shared possessions. She even claimed she was having some kind of mental breakdown and needed help. I turned on the TV and ignored all of it. Finally, there was silence. I waited another hour to make sure she was really gone, then started moving the bags. It took 14 trips down to the street. I could have used the building's service elevator to make it faster, but I wanted to take my time with this process. Each bag felt like I was shedding another piece of dead weight from my life. By 3 a.m., I had them all arranged neatly on the curb, like some kind of art installation about the end of relationships. I went back upstairs, cracked open an energy drink, and waited by the window. She came back around 4:20 a.m., probably thinking she could catch me when I was tired and emotional. Instead, she found her entire life scattered across the sidewalk in garbage bags. I watched from my bedroom window as she knelt on the concrete in her wrinkled engagement dress, frantically digging through bags and trying to salvage her belongings. She kept looking up at my window with this desperate expression, probably hoping to see some sign that this was all just a dramatic gesture that would blow over by morning. I just stood there watching. She had chosen to humiliate me in front of 22 people using the most private thing I had ever shared with her. Now she got to dig through garbage bags in her designer dress at 4 a.m. It seemed fair to me. She spent almost an hour and a half out there, loading stuff into her car and probably trying to figure out how her perfect evening had turned into this nightmare. Every few minutes she would look up at my window again, but I never moved from my spot. I just watched her deal with the consequences of her choices. My phone started buzzing at 7 a.m. the next morning and didn't stop for the next 6 days. Isabella's messages went through all the predictable stages. She kept sending long texts about how I was overreacting, how I had humiliated her in front of her family by walking out, and how I couldn't take a simple joke. She actually tried to claim that I owed her an apology for making a scene at the restaurant. Then came the threats. "If you think you can just throw me away like garbage, you're wrong. I know things about you that would destroy your reputation. Everyone at the office, your friends, your family, they'll all know exactly what kind of pathetic excuse for a man you really are. You have 26 hours to call me back, apologize, and fix this, or I'll make sure everyone knows your dirty little secrets." The audacity was absolutely incredible, but it showed me exactly who she really was underneath all that fake sweetness. I didn't respond to any of it. When that didn't work, she switched to bargaining. She promised she would never hurt me again, claimed she had just been nervous and trying to fit in with her family's sense of humor, and offered couples therapy, anger management, whatever I thought would help. Each message just confirmed that I had made the right decision. This wasn't someone having a momentary lapse in judgment. This was someone revealing their true character under pressure. Victoria called on Thursday morning, 4 days after the dinner disaster. I had been expecting this call, so I wasn't surprised when her name appeared on my phone. "You really embarrassed Isabella the other night," she started without even saying hello, her voice carrying that condescending tone I had grown to hate over the years. She was just trying to lighten the mood with a little humor. Married couples tease each other all the time. It's perfectly normal and healthy. "Is that what you call it?" I asked, keeping my voice neutral while mentally preparing for what was coming next. "Don't be so dramatic. She's absolutely devastated that you can't take a simple joke. Maybe you should think about whether you're really ready for marriage if you're going to run away at the first little bump in the road. Real men don't abandon their women over hurt feelings." I thought that it was time to find out exactly how deep this rabbit hole went. "Victoria, how often do you and Isabella discuss our private life?" "Well, mothers and daughters talk about everything. It's healthy communication between women, much better than bottling things up like men always do." "Everything meaning what exactly?" She actually laughed. That same harsh sound I had heard at the dinner. "Oh, honey, I know all about your challenges. Isabella tells me everything about your relationship, your insecurities, your performance issues. How else can I give her proper guidance about managing a man like you?" My stomach turned as the full scope of this betrayal became crystal clear, but I kept my voice steady. "What kind of guidance, exactly? Someone has to be in charge in a marriage, and it's usually the woman if she's smart about it. Men like you need a firm hand to keep you in line and remind you of your place." Isabella was just establishing the natural order at that dinner, showing everyone who really holds the power in your relationship. There it was, the puppet master revealing herself completely, admitting to coaching her daughter to humiliate me as some kind of twisted dominance display. I could hear decades of manipulation in her voice, the same techniques she had probably used to break down Marcus until he was nothing more than a nodding yes man. "Victoria," I said, my voice perfectly calm and controlled, "I want you to listen very carefully. Your daughter betrayed the most private, vulnerable part of my life for your entertainment. You've been treating my relationship like your personal soap opera, coaching her to humiliate me publicly as some sick power play. I'm not your husband to control." "Now wait just a minute. Tell me," I continued, cutting her off before she could start backpedaling, "does Marcus know you've been spending your time discussing another man's intimate details with your daughter? I'm sure he'd love to hear about your healthy communication habits over Sunday dinner. What do you think his church friends would say about their deacon's wife gossiping about private marital matters?" The line went dead immediately. That evening, Marcus called. The difference in his voice was striking. This wasn't the dominated, beaten-down husband I had grown used to seeing at family gatherings. There was pain there, but also something else. Clarity, maybe. "I'm so sorry," he managed between labored breaths that suggested he had been crying. "I had no idea what Isabella said until Victoria told me today. We raised her better than that, I promise you. We raised her to respect people, to honor confidences, to treat others with dignity." "Marcus," I said gently, because despite everything, I genuinely liked and respected the man underneath all that learned helplessness. "Did you think what she said was funny?" There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was thick with shame. "No. God help me. I laughed because everyone else was laughing, and I thought it was some kind of inside joke between you two. When I realized what actually happened, what she had really done, I've been sick about it for 4 days. I haven't been able to sleep. I appreciate you calling, but this isn't something I can forgive." "I understand," he said quietly. I wanted you to know that's not who we are. That's not who I raised her to be. She's been influencing Isabella in ways I never saw clearly before. I'm starting to see a lot of things I was blind to for too many years. I respected Marcus too much to probe deeper, but I could hear that the man was finally waking up after decades of sleep. Good for him. But I was done with anything that had to do with that family. After these calls, I closed my phone and started to rearrange my life again, removing toxicity completely from my surroundings. 4 months passed in what felt like a completely different life. I threw myself back into work with renewed focus, started hitting the gym religiously, and began cautiously dating again. Nothing serious, just testing the waters to see if I could trust someone new with even basic emotional intimacy. I thought the whole nightmare was finally behind me, filed away as an expensive lesson about trusting the wrong person. Then I started noticing whispers at my office. It began subtly, the way workplace gossip always does. Coworkers would cut conversations short when I walked by, meaningful glances were exchanged in meetings, and there was the kind of awkward energy that suggests everyone knows something you don't. I chalked it up to paranoia at first, thinking I was still too sensitive after everything that had happened. But the signs became impossible to ignore when people started treating me differently. Not hostile exactly, but with a kind of amused pity that made my skin crawl. My buddy Tyler from IT finally pulled me aside during lunch and asked the question I had been dreading. "Dude, is it true what they're saying about you? About your situation?" The words hit me like a physical blow. "Where did you hear that, man?" "It's all over the office. Kevin from accounting has been telling everyone who will listen. Says his new girlfriend gave him all the dirt on you. Real personal stuff." I didn't want to believe it, but he's got details that seem pretty specific. Kevin Matthews. Loud. Obnoxious. The kind of guy who treated personal information like currency to buy social status. He was the type who had never had an original thought in his life, but could repeat gossip with photographic accuracy. And apparently, he was dating Isabella now. The violation felt even worse than the original betrayal. She had taken my secrets to someone whose entire personality revolved around spreading rumors. Someone who would inevitably turn my private pain into office entertainment. It was like she had studied how to inflict maximum damage and crafted a plan specifically designed to destroy my professional reputation, along with my personal life. I confronted Kevin directly the next day, cornering him by the coffee machine during his usual afternoon gossip session with the other small-minded parasites who fed on other people's business. "We need to talk," I said, showing exactly how serious I was about keeping my name out of his mouth. He had that look of someone who thought he held all the cards. "Hey man, I'm just sharing what I've been told. If you've got issues with your equipment, maybe you shouldn't tell people about it. That's not my fault." The casual cruelty in his voice was exactly what I had expected from someone like him. "Kevin, I'm going to say this once and I want you to listen carefully. Stop spreading personal information about me, or this becomes a legal problem." He actually laughed, that braying sound that confirmed everything I had suspected about his character. "Dude, relax. Isabella tells me everything about you. Can't blame me for sharing funny stories with the guys. Maybe if you were more of a man, there wouldn't be so much to laugh about." My hands clenched into fists. For a split second, I considered introducing his face to the coffee machine. The smug look on his face, the casual way he was destroying my reputation. It took everything I had not to grab him by the throat, right there in front of everyone. But causing a scene would just give him more ammunition, so I stepped back, looked him dead in the eye, and said, "We'll see who's laughing when my lawyer gets done with you." That night, I called my lawyer, a woman I had used for various contract reviews who specialized in employment law and personal litigation. I explained the situation in clinical detail, focusing on harassment, damage to my professional reputation, and intentional infliction of emotional distress. She was sympathetic but direct about my options. "We can definitely pursue harassment and defamation claims," she said. "The fact that this involves intimate details shared in confidence makes it even stronger. I'd recommend starting with restraining orders to establish a paper trail. Then we can escalate from there." I'm not going to lie. I was devastated that night. More than anything, I was disgusted with myself for letting someone as toxic as Isabella into my life and for sharing something so personal with her. By Friday afternoon, Kevin and Isabella both had restraining orders served to them at their respective workplaces. The paperwork cited harassment, defamation, intentional infliction of emotional distress, and interference with business relationships. I made sure the service was public and embarrassing, timed for maximum disruption and humiliation. Isabella called me that evening from a blocked number, her voice a mixture of rage and panic that suggested she was finally starting to understand the consequences of her actions. "You're ruining my life," she screamed into the phone. "Kevin dumped me because he doesn't want legal drama. I could lose my job over this. All because you can't take a joke." I listened to her rant for exactly 35 seconds, letting her reveal more of her true character with every word before cutting her off. "Stay away from me. Stop discussing my private life with anyone, or the legal action escalates from here. This is your only warning." I hung up and immediately blocked that number too. I was done wasting energy on her psychotic behavior. It was time to let the lawyers handle it from here. 8 days after the restraining orders were served, exactly 1 week to the day, I received a video message from an unknown number while eating lunch at my desk. Thinking it might be work-related correspondence from a client, I opened it without checking the sender information first. The first frame showed Isabella's face, flushed and breathing heavily in a way that immediately told me what I was looking at. The camera pulled back to reveal she was engaged in explicit activity with Kevin in what looked like his cheaply furnished apartment. What followed was 3 minutes of explicit footage that made my stomach turn. Not because of the visual content itself, but because of what I could hear in the audio and the obvious intention behind sending it to me. She was looking directly at the camera at several points throughout the video, clearly aware it was recording and performing specifically for my benefit. At the end, while still engaged with Kevin, she looked straight into the lens and said my name, followed by, "This is what it looks like to be with a real man. Too bad you'll never know what that feels like." The malice was absolutely breathtaking. I sat there staring at my phone screen, feeling a level of disgust and betrayal I had never experienced before. This was a woman I had planned to marry, who I had shared my dreams and fears with, who I had trusted with my heart and my vulnerabilities. She had studied my weaknesses like a military strategist and deployed them with surgical precision to inflict maximum damage. I thought about going to the police immediately. Creating and distributing explicit material to harass someone had to violate several state and federal laws. But as I sat there contemplating my options, trying to process the sheer scope of her malice, I remembered Marcus's voice during our last conversation. The pain of a father realizing his daughter had become someone he didn't recognize. I thought about Victoria's smug attitude and her admission that she had orchestrated Isabella's public humiliation of me as some twisted power play. This video would destroy them both, but in very different ways. Marcus would be devastated to see what his daughter had become, while Victoria would face social and financial consequences she had never anticipated. The religious community they were part of, the social standing Victoria valued so highly, the comfortable life Marcus had provided, all of it would disappear once the right people saw who Isabella really was. I made several copies of strategic portions of the video. Nothing explicitly graphic that could get me in legal trouble, but enough to show what was happening and capture the audio of Isabella's final cruel comment. Then I created anonymous email accounts using public computers and sent clips to Marcus, Victoria, Nathan, and several of Isabella's close friends who still maintained social media connections with people I knew. The response was swift and more devastating than I could have imagined. Marcus completely lost it and called me at 7 a.m. the next morning. I had never heard a human being sound so completely broken, so utterly destroyed by what they had discovered about someone they loved. "What has she become?" he whispered into the phone, his voice barely audible. "How did we raise someone capable of this kind of cruelty? Where did we go wrong?" Through his tears and broken sentences, he told me he had been awake all night after receiving the video. Not just because of what it showed, but because it confirmed everything he had started to realize about his wife's toxic influence on their daughter over the years. Victoria had been poison in their home for decades, systematically undermining his authority, manipulating their children, and turning their family into something ugly and dysfunctional. "I filed for divorce this morning," he said, his voice gaining strength as he spoke. 34 years of marriage, but I can't live with someone who turned our daughter into this monster. I'm cutting off Isabella's graduate school funding too. She's got 1 semester left, but she's about to learn what real consequences feel like. By noon, I was getting updates from mutual friends and former colleagues. Isabella had been frantically calling everyone in her contact list, trying to explain the video and claiming it was fake or taken out of context, or somehow edited to make her look bad. But the audio was unmistakably her voice saying my name, and her friends weren't buying any of the desperate excuses. Several people who had known us as a couple were horrified by the cruelty they had witnessed. Victoria was in full panic mode because she had never worked a legitimate job in her adult life and had no idea how to survive financially without Marcus's income. She had spent decades as a professional housewife, using her husband's money to maintain her social status while manipulating everyone around her. I guess she never thought her husband might grow a spine one day. Isabella, meanwhile, was facing the immediate reality of her final semester of graduate school with no way to pay for tuition, housing, or living expenses. But that wasn't even her biggest problem. Word travels fast in the marketing world, and our industry is smaller than most people think. The restraining order filing was public record, and someone at her firm had done their homework. By the end of the week, she had been quietly let go from her internship. Turns out marketing firms don't like legal drama following their employees around, especially when it involves harassment and defamation claims. Without her internship, her chances of landing a decent job after graduation basically evaporated. Marketing companies do thorough background checks. And this kind of legal baggage was career poison. She was stuck trying to secure emergency student loans while working part-time at some coffee shop in Midtown. Kevin got his own taste of consequences at our office. Management had been looking for reasons to get rid of him anyway. His gossip-spreading habit and general unprofessionalism had made him plenty of enemies over the years. The restraining order just gave them the excuse they needed. He was called into HR on Friday afternoon and didn't come back Monday. I heard through the grapevine that they cited creating a hostile work environment along with some performance issues they had been documenting. A week after Kevin got fired, I saw him at a gas station near the office. He looked like he had aged 6 years, unshaven, wearing wrinkled clothes with that defeated look of someone whose world had collapsed. He saw me too and started to say something, then thought better of it, and just walked away. Smart choice on his part. The other day, I heard from Tyler that Isabella has been showing up at Kevin's apartment building, calling his work, and basically stalking the guy. She's even been spotted sitting in her car outside our office a couple of times, probably hoping to catch him. Pathetic doesn't begin to cover it. Within a week, Marcus's divorce attorney had frozen all joint assets, and Isabella's comfortable suburban lifestyle came crashing down. They got evicted when Victoria couldn't make the mortgage payments. Last I heard, Victoria was working retail for the first time in her life, dealing with managers half her age telling her what to do. Isabella was bouncing between friends' couches, trying to finish her degree while working whatever part-time job she could find. 4 weeks later, Marcus called me one last time. His voice was completely different. Stronger, more confident than I had ever heard it. I wanted to thank you for helping me see what my family had become. I've been weak for too many years, but I'm finding my strength again. There's a woman at church who understands faith and kindness. I'm remembering what healthy relationships actually look like. As for me, I'm doing better than I have in years. The workplace gossip died completely when Kevin disappeared, and I've been seeing someone new, a woman who understands that trust is sacred and secrets aren't weapons. She knows about my condition, but she learned about it the right way, with understanding and acceptance. People ask if I feel guilty about what happened to them. The simple answer is, you don't get to systematically destroy someone's trust and expect mercy when your actions have consequences. I didn't create that video. I didn't humiliate her at our engagement dinner, and I didn't spread my private information around the workplace. I just made sure the right people saw who she really was. The restraining order is still active. I haven't heard from her in months. And oh, I kept my grandmother's ring. It's in my safe now, waiting for someone who actually deserves it. So what do you think? Am I the one who screwed up here?